Todo mundo dice que Durán le ganó a Maragall, pero se la dieron a él. Y a mí no me ganó Maragall, a mí me ganaron los hermanos Petrolelli.
Roberto Durán.
At 74 years old, Roberto Durán sits in his home in Panama and says something he's never said before. I only feared him. For 5 decades, the man known as Manos de Piedra, Hands of Stone, fought everyone. He climbed from the streets of Panama to become a 4-division world champion. He knocked out 70 men. He won 103 fights. He never backed down. But fear? That's a word Durán rarely used, until now. In a recent interview, Durán opened up about the 5 opponents who tested him in ways no one else ever could. These weren't just tough fights. They were defining moments. Each man represented a different kind of danger, and today we're breaking down exactly who they were, what made them so dangerous, and why Durán's respect for them only makes his legend stronger. Let's start with the man Durán calls the hardest to hit clean, Ken Buchanan. In 1972, Durán was 21 years old and hungry. He'd been tearing through the lightweight division, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before he got his shot at a world title. That shot came on June 26, 1972, at Madison Square Garden in New York. His opponent, Ken Buchanan, the WBA lightweight champion from Scotland. Buchanan wasn't a knockout artist. He wasn't a trash talker, he was a technician. At the time of their fight, Buchanan had a record of 43 wins and only 1 loss. He retired with 61 wins and 8 losses overall. He was respected across the boxing world for his disciplined style, his sophisticated movement, and his ring intelligence. And he made Durán miss. A lot. Durán later said Buchanan had the best defense he ever faced. For a fighter like Durán, whose entire identity was built on pressure, aggression, and landing brutal combinations, that was the ultimate compliment. Buchanan forced Durán into a tactical struggle. Every time Durán tried to unload, Buchanan wasn't there. He slipped, he pivoted. He made Durán work harder than he ever had before. The fight went 13 rounds. It was physical, it was grueling, and it was controversial. In the 13th round, Durán landed a blow that left Buchanan unable to continue. The problem? Some say the punch was low, some say it came after the bell. To this day, people debate whether it was legal, but what nobody debates is this: Durán had to dig deeper than ever before to solve the puzzle that was Ken Buchanan. That fight became the foundation of Durán's career. It taught him that raw power wasn't always enough. You had to outthink your opponent. You had to break them mentally and physically. And Buchanan, with his slick defense and high boxing IQ, forced Durán to evolve from an aggressive prospect into a legitimate world champion. Durán won the WBA lightweight championship that night, but he never forgot how hard Buchanan made him work for it. In later interviews, Durán would frequently elevate Buchanan above even the widely recognized 4 kings when discussing pure difficulty. That says everything about the level of challenge Buchanan presented. This wasn't about size or power. It was about skill, intelligence, and the ability to frustrate a fighter who thrived on chaos. Now let's talk about the man who hit Durán harder than anyone else, Esteban de Jesus. Before Durán fought Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, and Thomas Hearns, he had a bitter rivalry with a Puerto Rican lightweight named Esteban de Jesus. This wasn't just a boxing rivalry, it was personal. It was nationalistic. Panama versus Puerto Rico, and it defined Durán's early career. Their first fight happened in November 1972 in New York. It was a non-title fight, and Durán lost by unanimous decision. That was shocking enough, but what really shook the boxing world was what happened in the fight. Esteban de Jesus knocked Durán down. Durán rose at the count of 6. He was hurt, he was embarrassed, and he never forgot it. Years later, Durán would face much bigger punchers, Thomas Hearns, Marvin Hagler. But when asked who hit him the hardest, Durán still says Esteban de Jesus. Why? Because it wasn't just about the force of the punch. It was about the consequence. That knockdown was the first time Durán had ever been dropped in a professional fight. It shattered the perception of his invincibility. It forced him to confront a vulnerability he didn't know he had. And psychologically, that punch carried more weight than any other shot he ever took. Durán didn't accept the loss. He pursued de Jesus relentlessly. In March 1974, they fought again. This time, it was for Durán's WBA lightweight title. And this time, Durán knocked de Jesus out in the 11th round. It was a definitive victory, a statement. Durán had avenged the loss, and he'd done it by knockout. But the rivalry wasn't over. In January 1978, they met for a third and final time in Las Vegas. By then, Durán held the WBA title and de Jesus held the WBC title. The winner would unify the lightweight division. Durán delivered a technical knockout in the 12th round, cementing his dominance at 135 pounds. 2 victories, 2 knockouts. Durán had erased the psychological threat of Esteban de Jesus, but he never erased the memory of that first knockdown, and that's why, even decades later, Durán calls de Jesus the hardest puncher he ever faced. The trilogy with de Jesus showcased something essential about Durán's character. He didn't run from challenges, he didn't make excuses excuses. When someone hurt him, he came back stronger. When someone beat him, he demanded a rematch. And when he finally conquered that opponent, he did it decisively. That resilience, that refusal to accept defeat, is what separated Durán from good fighters and made him a legend. If you're enjoying this breakdown of Durán's toughest opponents, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We're diving deep into boxing history here, and there's a lot more coming. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. Now let's talk about the man Durán calls the toughest fighter he ever faced, Marvin Hagler. In November 1983, Roberto Durán stepped into the ring with marvelous Marvin Hagler, the undisputed middleweight champion of the world. Durán was attempting something historic, winning a world title in a fourth weight class. He'd already conquered lightweight, welterweight, and light middleweight. Now he was going after the middleweight crown at 160 pounds. That's 30 pounds heavier than his prime fighting weight. Hagler was a monster. Before the Durán fight, he defended his middleweight title 7 consecutive times. All 7 defenses ended in knockouts. He was a 4-1 favorite. He was guaranteed $5 million. Durán was guaranteed $1.5 million. Nobody expected Durán to win, but Durán didn't just compete. He dominated stretches of the fight. Durán says he hit Hagler with everything he had, and Hagler just kept coming. That's why Durán calls Hagler the toughest opponent and the man with the best chin. Hagler absorbed punishment that would have stopped most fighters. In the 12th and 13th rounds, Durán landed hard, clean right hands that visibly marked Hagler. Blood poured from Hagler's swollen left eye. And after 13 rounds, Durán was ahead on all 3 official scorecards. He was winning, but Hagler didn't quit. He didn't back down. He kept pressing. And in the final 2 rounds, Hagler rallied. He turned the fight around and won by unanimous decision over 15 rounds. Durán lost, but he forced Hagler to go the distance for the first time since Hagler won the middleweight title. That alone is a testament to Durán's skill, power, and heart. He was a lightweight fighting at middleweight, and he nearly became a 4-division world champion. Hagler later admitted that Durán was the best opponent he ever fought. That's mutual respect at the highest level. Durán tested Hagler's durability. Hagler tested Durán's ability to compete at an unnatural weight, and both men walked away with their legacies enhanced. What made Hagler so tough wasn't just his chin, it was his relentless pressure. Hagler was known as a brutally efficient killer in the ring. He didn't waste movement, he didn't showboat. He came forward with bad intentions, and he broke opponents with sustained aggression. Durán, who built his own career on relentless pressure, finally met someone who matched his intensity, and for 15 rounds, they went to war. The fact that Durán remained competitive deep into the fight proves that even past his prime, even fighting at an unnatural weight, he was still one of the most dangerous men in boxing. But if Hagler was the toughest, who does Durán call the best overall opponent? Sugar Ray Leonard. The rivalry between Roberto Durán and Sugar Ray Leonard is one of the most famous in boxing history. It began in June 1980 with a fight that became known as the Brawl in Montreal. Leonard was the WBC welterweight champion. He was fast, he was slick, he was an Olympic gold medalist, and in that first fight, he made a critical mistake. He abandoned his strengths and fought Durán's fight. Leonard stood toe-to-toe with Durán. He brawled on the inside, he traded punches, and Durán loved it. Durán won by unanimous decision, capturing the WBC welterweight championship and handing Leonard his first professional loss. But Durán doesn't call Leonard the best overall opponent because of that first fight. He calls him the best because of what Leonard did after. In their rematch later that year, Leonard executed a near-perfect game plan. He used his speed, he used his footwork, he taunted Durán, he frustrated him. And in the 8th round, Durán, mentally broken and physically exhausted, turned to the referee and said, "No mas, no more." It was the most infamous moment of Durán's career. But instead of diminishing Leonard's greatness, Durán praises it. He says Leonard demonstrated resilience, adaptability, and mental fortitude. Leonard didn't just come back from defeat. He dominated the rematch and went on to become a multi-division champion, widely regarded as one of the greatest fighters of all time. Durán respects that. He says it takes a lot to come back from defeat, and Leonard did it. That's why Leonard is the best overall opponent, not because he beat Durán twice, but because of how he evolved, how he adapted, and how he built a legendary career after losing. Durán's victory in Montreal, therefore, becomes even more impressive. He beat the man he considers the most skilled and strategically brilliant boxer of his era. Leonard had every physical advantage. He was faster, he was younger, he had better footwork. But in that first fight, Durán imposed his will. He dragged Leonard into a street fight and beat him at his own game. That victory remains one of the defining moments of Durán's career, and Leonard's ability to come back from it only adds to the legend of both men. Leonard went on to capture titles in 5 different weight classes. He defeated Marvin Hagler in one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. He became the face of the sport in the 1980s, and through it all, he carried the knowledge that Roberto Durán had once broken him. That's the mark of true greatness. Leonard didn't let that loss define him. He used it as fuel. But there's one more name on Durán's list, and this one represents pure, devastating danger. Thomas Hearns. In June 1984, Durán faced Thomas the Hitman Hearns for the WBA light middleweight title. Hearns was tall, he had a long reach, and he had what Durán calls a nuclear right hand. Durán was outmatched physically, but he'd overcome physical disadvantages before. He thought he could do it again. He was wrong. In the first round, round, Hearns knocked Durán down twice. In the second round, Hearns landed a devastating right hand that knocked Durán out cold. Durán's lights went out before he hit the canvas. It was one of the most brutal knockouts in boxing history. Durán later admitted he wasn't in shape for that fight. He said he didn't train properly. He struggled to make the 154-pound weight limit. He wasn't prepared. But even with those excuses, Durán acknowledges that Hearns possessed singular, overwhelming power. Durán had faced heavy hitters before. He'd absorbed punishment from Hagler. He'd been knocked down by De Jesus, but Hearns was different. Hearns had the ability to end a fight with one punch, and he did. That's why Durán classifies Hearns as the lethal finisher, the most dangerous opponent, the man who could turn your lights out in an instant. Durán's experience against Hearns taught him that some fighters are just too dangerous to take lightly. You need to be in peak condition. You need to respect their power. And even then, one mistake can end everything. Hearns promised a second-round knockout before the fight, and he delivered. That level of precision, that ability to predict and execute a knockout, is what made Hearns so terrifying. He wasn't just powerful, he was accurate. He knew where to land the punch, and he knew when to throw it. Durán, who had never been knocked out before, learned the hard way that Hearns was a different breed of puncher. So let's recap. Roberto Durán, at 74 years old, has named the 5 opponents who defined his career. Ken Buchanan taught him that technical skill and defense could frustrate even the most aggressive fighter. Buchanan had the best defense Durán ever faced, forcing him to evolve into a complete champion. Esteban de Jesus delivered the hardest punch Durán ever absorbed, psychologically and physically. That knockdown in their first fight shattered Durán's invincibility and forced him to confront his vulnerabilities. Marvin Hagler was the toughest opponent, the man with the best chin. Hagler absorbed Durán's power and kept coming, forcing Durán to go 15 rounds on a losing effort that still enhanced his legacy. Sugar Ray Leonard was the best overall opponent. Leonard's adaptability, speed, and mental fortitude made him the most skilled and strategically brilliant fighter Durán ever faced. And Durán's victory over Leonard in their first fight remains one of the defining achievements of his career. Thomas Hearns was the lethal finisher, the most dangerous opponent. Hearns possessed knockout power that could end a fight in an instant, and he proved it by knocking Durán out cold in the second round. These 5 men represent the greatest challenges in boxing. They tested Durán's defense, his power, his durability, his intelligence, and his survival instincts. And by facing them, Durán proved that he belonged among the greatest fighters of all time. But here's the thing. Durán's legacy isn't just about who he beat. It's about who he fought. He didn't avoid anyone. He moved up in weight to challenge bigger, stronger men. He fought in 4 different divisions, and he earned the respect of every opponent he faced. At 74, Durán isn't admitting fear. He's giving credit where credit is due. He's honoring the men who pushed him to his limits. And in doing so, he's reinforcing his own greatness. Because the tougher your opponents, the greater your victories. And Durán's opponents were the toughest the sport has ever seen. Think about it. Durán didn't just fight in one era. He fought across multiple generations. He faced different styles, different strategies, different physical challenges. And he adapted every single time. That versatility, that willingness to test himself against anyone is what makes him a true legend. Most fighters dominate one weight class and retire. Durán won titles in 4. Most fighters avoid dangerous opponents. Durán sought them out. And most fighters, when they lose, make excuses. Durán learned, adjusted, and came back stronger. His career spanned from 1968 to 2002. Think about that. He fought professionally for 34 years. He saw the sport change around him. He watched new styles emerge, new training methods develop, new generations of fighters rise and fall. And through it all, he remained relevant. He remained dangerous. He remained Manos de Piedra. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out our other breakdowns of boxing legends. There's a lot more coming, and you won't want to miss it. I'll see you in the next one.